I had been addicted to sugar for 10 plus years, and during that time I had been using sugar as a coping mechanism. Anytime I would get a bad grade or just feel shitty about myself, I would instantly numb myself with sugar-filled garbage that I would get from these fast food delivery apps. And yes, this would actually work in the short term, but what I realized was that my depression and my anxiety got a lot worse in the long run. And the worst part is I was now addicted to sugar. For years I had been trying to beat this addiction, but I kept on failing. After thousands of trials and errors, reading hundreds of self-help books, and watching hours of podcasts on the neuroscience of addiction, I have come up with a 5-step system that helped me quit sugar permanently. The system has worked so well that for the last 2 years, I haven't had a single gram of sugar. So let's get right into it. When you consume sugar, your brain releases a massive amount of pleasure chemical called dopamine. Your brain loves dopamine and was actually designed to remember the thing that caused this dopamine release. So now eating sugar is linked with pleasure. But the problem is when you decide to stop eating sugar, your brain does not really like that because you are trying to take its source of pleasure away. So it now starts to complain and demand that you feed it sugar. And this is why you get cravings. I try to fight off these cravings using my willpower alone. I would do it successfully for about 3-4 days, but then on day 5 I was just so exhausted from constantly fighting off these cravings that I would just give in and relapse. This must have happened around 1,000 times. That is when I learned that willpower is a limited resource and it cannot be used to fight off cravings. But what if I told you that there was a way to never have cravings in the first place? A way to make your brain forget just how fun sugar was. Let me put it this way. Do you miss cocaine or crystal meth? The answer is probably not, because you have never actually used them, so your brain has not tied them to pleasure. This is exactly how you're going to feel about sugar when you start fasting. Fasting is when you do not consume food for a particular period of time. When your body does not ingest food, it starts doing some pretty cool repair functions. One of the things that happens when you fast is that your brain begins to rewire itself. And this rewiring of the brain allows it to unlink the connection between sugar and pleasure, thus killing all your cravings. Okay, so the first time I heard about this, I was a bit skeptical about fasting. But I thought to myself, why not? What do I have to lose? So this is what my fasting protocol looked like. I followed the OMAD protocol, which stands for 1 meal a day. So I just had one large meal at the end of the day, which was my dinner. This meant that I was in a fasted state for 22 hours, and I would have my large meal in a 2-hour window. Now I'm going to be honest here, the first 2 or 3 days were kind of hard because my body was still adapting to fasting. But from day 3 onwards, I started to feel amazing. My sugar cravings had now died down by at least 80%. Doing this fasting based protocol for just 4 weeks completely ended my 10-year-long sugar addiction. And it felt like I was just born again. Back when I was addicted to sugar, my fridge used to look something like this. Sugar was just always a few feet away from me, and this meant that I would have sugar pretty often. If I was bored, I would go to the fridge. If I was stressed, I would go to the fridge. But one day I came across this book called Atomic Habits. This book is all about setting good habits and breaking bad habits. And one of the principles in this book that really stuck with me was make bad habits difficult to perform by adding barriers between them. Because when you add barriers between yourself and an activity, then you have to spend more energy to do that activity, and thus you are less likely to do it. So the first thing that I did was I removed all processed sugar from my house. And the next thing I did was I deleted all the fast food delivery apps from my phone. This meant that if I actually now wanted to eat sugar, I would have to drive to the store and pick it up, stand in line at the payment counter, and then drive back home. Believe me, just having these tiny barriers made it 10 times less likely that I would go and eat sugar. Look, barriers are great, but there was just one problem. Social gatherings. I realized that nearly 90% of all social gatherings are centered around processed food and sugar. And when you're at such gatherings surrounded by sugary food and people freely eating these things, then not only are the barriers lifted, but now you're being strongly encouraged to consume sugar. And you might do this not out of temptation, but just to fit in. What I then decided to do was greatly limit large social gatherings, especially the ones that are centered around food. And I know that missing out on social social events kind of sucks. But the truth is, social events are a big reason why most people cheat on their diets. But there are times when social gatherings are unavoidable. During such events, I would have my guard up. I would firmly say no to any sort of processed food that was being offered, even if the person really insisted. And learning to repeatedly say no and have that bit of an awkward face-off was crucial to beating sugar addiction. In the past, I did not really know how to handle stress, sadness, anxiety, because whenever I felt these negative emotions, I would instantly numb myself with sugar. So I never really learned how to deal with them in a healthy way. So when I finally stopped having sugar, these emotions were running wild. I had to now learn other ways to deal with these negative emotions. In my search, I found a few tools that worked incredibly well. The first tool that I used was journaling. Now, if I ever feel stressed or anxious about something, I would articulate my thoughts and just write them down. Writing down your thoughts allows you to declutter your brain, come up with solutions to your problems, and also helps you be more mindful of your own emotions. And all these things help you lower your stress and anxiety in a healthier way. The next tool was working out. Not a specific kind of exercise, just working hard and sweating. And I know that when people think of working out, they tend to think of all the benefits to this external physique, but what most people don't talk about is the therapeutic benefits of working out. Working out is like nature's antidepressant. So now when I would have a bad day or feel sad about something, instead of numbing myself with sugar, I would just go and hit the bag and just sweat. By the time I was done with my training session, even though the problems still remained, my mood had gone up by like 4 or 5 points. Now, tools such as journaling, cold showers, exercise, and meditation, they all help a lot in dealing with negative emotions. But sometimes life is still going to suck and you do not need to be happy or stimulated all the time. Just knowing this and accepting this helped me not to run towards sugar. Back when I was addicted to sugar, I would eat whenever I wanted to eat and whatever I wanted to eat. This meant that I would be snacking all day. Also, I did not know what specifically would I have for lunch or dinner. This meant that when the time actually arrived, I would have to make decisions on the go. And when you make decisions on the go, they are generally not the best decisions. I would always find myself debating if I could have just one piece of cake because, hey, moderation is good. Or some other excuse that I'm actually bulking and I need the calories. What I do now is that I pre-plan most things to avoid making decisions on the go. If you are making decisions about lunch moments before lunch when you're hit with hunger pangs, then you're obviously going to take the quick fun option. But when you pre-plan things such as what time are you going to have lunch and what exactly are you going to have for lunch, then you have removed this process of making decisions on the go. Each of the components in this system are extremely important. Remember, if even one of these components is missing, then the entire system breaks and you end up falling back into sugar addiction. Sugar addiction is challenging to beat, but there is something far more destructive: lust addiction. So make sure that you watch this video for my full system on how to beat lust addiction.